My name is Mr. Robert.Luebke. I'm the president of Solution Technology Associates, which is a business consulting company in the middle of the United States, not far from the Motor City, Detroit, but the city is in Lansing, and I live in a suburb which is called Okemos, Michigan. Our company has been in business for over 45 years, started in 1972. Over the years, we've been involved in a variety of different activities, starting off with educational consulting services, then we moved into microcomputers, made a lot of money because we got into microcomputers when it was first starting, and then we transitioned into business process engineering, and from there we got involved with ISO 9000, which is the industry standards of quality throughout the world. Some of you are familiar with them, some of you may not be. Then we migrated into enterprise project management, and then we built quality management systems. Then we moved into HR activities, importing people from all sorts of countries. And when Mr. Donald Trump made that difficult, then we moved into credit card processing, and our current mainstay of activities has shifted over to Bitcoin. And the very purpose of this seminar is to, shall we say, share with you all. Many of you have extraordinary deep knowledge of Bitcoins, and we understand that, and we appreciate your presence here. But one of the big problems with the execution of Bitcoin deals is, how do you combine a variety of different perceptions of these deals and make them effective? And that's kind of sort of what we are wanting to focus on today, because each and every one of you potentially could provide certain kinds of services. For example, we are in the process of setting up an exchange, and there's a gentleman hopefully that's here that would be providing some of the banking services for that exchange. We have a couple of people here that are in different countries that are saying, what is this Solution Technology and Robert.Luebke, and why do they think their exchange and their way of doing Bitcoin business is different or better or whatnot? We're not making any of those claims at all, but what we want to do is we want to focus to the deals that we do. And what is it? It's basically an analysis on and providing you a good understanding of why deals work and why deals don't work, and some potential solutions to that, ranging from the simplest kinds of deals to the complex. And each kind of deal becomes more and more complicated, and it becomes more time consuming, and it becomes less profitable. Now, let's start focusing again. The assumption is you have a little bit of knowledge about Bitcoins. That's not the purpose of this, but what we want to do is start talking about some fundamentals about deals. The first thing and the most important thing for a deal is trust. The buyer doesn't trust the seller. The seller doesn't trust the buyer. Connecting these people might be various different intermediates. Now, we all know that plaguing us, particularly over the last 4.5 years, there's so many scammers out there. There's so many people that can be brought to the deal table, but at the last minute they flinch and decide not to go there. There are challenges in executing the deals because of the nature of the trust building process. Some people want to move very fast, other people expect to go slow, but the bottom line is trust is the number one reason Bitcoin trading is so difficult, and we would like to share some solutions to that. The second important ingredient is excellent communication. The foundation of that is you got to have a decent internet. You know, there are a lot of people in some of the smaller countries and developing countries, they don't get it. You have to find the best possible telecommunications and internet service if you want to play with the big boys and girls that are involved in the Bitcoin experience. In addition, there is another kind of communication, and that is you got to speak the common language. And I'm sorry to say, it's English. It's English. And it's not necessarily American English, but it is some form of English. And one of the problems people don't want to admit is the communication is distorted because of accents. And then we have to look at another aspect of communication. Your culture and my culture are totally different. And we need to remember we are no longer individual separate countries. We are part of a huge planet. And cryptocurrency is becoming potentially the de facto common currency. There are predictions of the possibilities as long as Russia, US, and China do not kill the Bitcoin. There is so many billions and possibly trillions of dollars that are being made. Even though there are some areas that want to suppress it, part of the benefit of suppressing it is to increase the private, shall we say, gray money or even black money activities. But going back to the concept of being part of one world, we have to respect each other's cultures. We also have to respect the time zone differences. And that's what I'm trying to do, is have this seminar at different times. So part of the excellent communication, technology-wise, language-wise, and a mutual respect of each other in that process for excellent communication. Another thing which is very hard to do is honesty. Nobody wants to reveal the cards that they're playing. There's nothing wrong with being a new Bitcoin player and you've only got 5, 10, 15 coins to deal with. You will sit at a table of people of like-minded, like-circumstantial, but if you want to move to the bigger tables, many times people say, well, I can do this and I can do that, and half the time they can't. So honesty for myself has been very profound in having people understand I really am a trustable character, because I don't see my limitations necessarily as a weakness, but honesty in terms of saying what you do and doing what you say, and most importantly, the follow through as a part of the honesty. Integrity, that is, again, saying what you say, saying what you do, and doing what you say. The next part is transparency, and that is also very difficult to achieve because buyers want to know everything about who are the middlemen and how much are they getting. Is that transparency really necessary? Well, for some people, it's a deal breaker. For other people, they don't care. We have a seller that basically has told us, I don't care what it takes to get the price discount for the buyer. I prefer if they don't worry about the fact that I'm giving a discount of 8% and they're only going to get 3 because it took so many people to get through. But transparency, having a degree of revelation of what's going on in the game. And people don't want to share that because half the time an intermediary will say, oh, I've got 10 sellers and they can do this deal. You haven't even made your first deal. How can you say you can do this? You have to recognize transparency is something that's very important. As I alluded to before, respect. And we kind of covered that, but respect for the deal, respect for the people that make the deal possible, and respect that some of the intermediary people are doing all the work that technically the other people should be doing. And by the way, if somebody wants to have a question, just turn on your mic and you can raise, that's equivalent of raising your hand, and I'm happy to have any questions. But I would kind of like to go through this activity and leave the last 20 minutes or so for questions in general and comments on improving this. Another aspect, there is a Chinese word, naixin, and that is a sense of patience. Many Westerners, and frankly, a lot of folks that I meet in South America and some people in the African continent, get the deal done. Got it done right now. Okay, can't wait for you. Bye. Doesn't work that way. You have to have patience. And you have to have the patience to be able to say, if this deal doesn't work out, I'm going to walk away from it. Now, that's hard if you're in a desperate situation. And honestly, there are many of us that are hustling like crazy to get deals because we need the money. But patience is absolutely essential. And that is patience for the deal to formulate and the patience to carry out the activities related to it. In addition, you have to have tenacity. That is a simple word that means no matter how much time and effort, you gotta go through the process and stick to it. I am finding that the most successful younger Bitcoin traders are those that have the patience and the ability to work until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get 2 or 3 hours of sleep, hit the ground running the next day. Well, unfortunately, I'm not one of those people, but I'm still doing it. And I realize I got to keep pounding, that you've got to spend your time in a disciplined fashion, but be tenacious in getting things done. Another important thing, and this is becoming more and more of a deal breaker, and that is KYC, which is known in the industry, Know Your Client. I am embarrassed to tell you, I'm even almost embarrassed to say that I'm an American individual, because the American way of doing Bitcoin trading up until a few years ago, you knew that if somebody provided you KYC, they showed you your driver's license, they showed you their passport, they showed you key documents that prove that their business is a real business, etc. Now we are finding people in our own country that are scamming and using that to buy credit cards, to do things, use that information in a nefarious fashion. But it is essential that it has to be provided, because there are people out there that are trying to do Bitcoin deals for nefarious purposes. And I want to make it abundantly clear, our company and the people that are sitting in this room of the go-to meeting, we prefer to deal with what's called white money. In other words, money that is not encumbered like black money. What is examples of black money? Blood diamond monies that have been converted into Bitcoin, sex trafficking, weapons, terrorism, hawala, which those in India know what the hell I'm talking about. We prefer to deal in as clean business as possible. And I will tell you, there are millions and millions of dollars that are being traded by huge companies that are trying to get a deal done quickly. And we do understand sometimes we have to work with gray money. And we'll talk about what gray money means later. It's not completely black, but there might be some issues with it. So those are the key issues, along with the final point, which is compromise. And that is something that I think a lot of people have lost the ability to do. There are times you say, I'd much rather, I'm not going to get my mandate 1%, maybe 0.5%, or even 0.25%. And I'm faced with that right now. I've worked on a deal for now almost a month and a half. It is only 200 Bitcoins, but that means if I get that deal done, there's 5,000 Bitcoins after that and 50,000 Bitcoins after that. So if I have to compromise and take a small part of something, 100%, I would much rather have 0.25% of something than 100% of nothing. And the issue of compromise is something that is required. Now, let me go to the next one. Why do people buy Bitcoins? And this is for some of the new people. Well, the first reason is, like investing in stocks and bonds, you want to speculate on the rising value. Everybody knows that just about this time in 2017, Bitcoin, which in May of 2017 was trading $3,000-$4,000, by September and October was already up to $10,000 to $12,000, and by just right before the Thanksgiving season in the United States went up, depending on the market, $19,000 to $21,000. Now, this type of Bitcoin trading, we, Solution Technology, are less interested, because it's kind of like investing in coin, waiting until it grows and selling at a later point. Another reason people do Bitcoins is they want to send money to others with anonymity. And this is what's driving governments crazy. They don't like it because they're bad people doing it and they're good people doing it. And we're going to be honest that here in the United States, they've allowed Bitcoins, but they want to make sure we get our taxes. So that's something that is looked at depending on the exchanges. And it is a source of wealth that is not regulated by governments and banks. In fact, banks absolutely detest Bitcoins. But now some of the biggest banks are quietly behind the scenes looking at how they can invest in it. In fact, even investment instruments like Bitcoin hedge funds are coming into play. With a Bitcoin, there are now vacations. You can walk out of your country and have your wallet card, and you can go in certain countries now and go to a Bitcoin money exchanging, or what we call ATM, and put in your wallet number, put in a passcode, and out comes your cash. You don't have to have any money with you. And one of the things that our group is exploring is the possibility of a universal Bitcoin credit card. Right now, the credit card industry entertained the idea when we proposed to two major companies, Visa, MasterCharge, and we also proposed it to some of the alternative charges. And there are some kind of sort of Bitcoin credit cards, but they're not really. They're kind of more like debit cards. But the first person that comes out with a Bitcoin credit card, and that's one of the reasons, one of the gentlemen that we're hoping to talk to is to work with us in creating, assuming that he can provide cash. We have a gentleman that we have available to us that can do some of the banking for everyone here. If you want a truckload of money delivered to Pakistan, he can do it. If you want some money to come from one place and transfer to another, this guy can do it. Very good person. Now, why do people sell coins? Well, still haven't learned to use the new version of PowerPoint. Just like we said before, like investing in the stocks and bonds to speculate on the rising value, but now they sell it to take their profits. You probably heard about the 19-year-old kid here in the United States that was on television and radio and all sorts of places about 4 or 5 months ago. 19-year-old, and he's worth about $40 million, if I'm not correct, because he started in 2009 when Bitcoins were like, I think, was it 50 cents to 80 cents? And he had just a little paper route, and he came from a very modestly poor, not quite middle-class family. And he just kept on buying Bitcoins because he had a science teacher and somebody else that were talking about these newfangled things. Maybe it's good. So he kept on buying them. And when the price of Bitcoins went to $19,000, if you paid 57 cents and you can convert that to $19,000, that's a pretty good thing. That's a sign of that. Again, people sell coins to get money without using banks or paying taxes. I'm sorry. Let's try it again. And what we are engaging in is to move vast or small amounts of money for any purpose. And I'm not going to say anything more. Those of you that understand. Now, to conclude a deal requiring large amounts of money, I want to show you something here. This is a signed contract. I can't reveal the source, but I want you to see here. We had a signed contract for 100,000 Bitcoins. How much is that? That's getting into the billions of dollars. We had a contract, and this contract, 5,000 Bitcoins per day, and their signed signatures. This money was being used by a group of investors who want to very quickly participate in a huge development activity that's taking place both in Dubai and in, I think the other place is France. And in order to accumulate the funds and move it quickly and come up with a quick investment, a group of people were putting together this kind of deal. So this is an example of that type of thing to conclude with raise money for large and urgent needs. Sometimes you have to, if you are in dire straits and you have some bitcoins, you're going to have to sell those bitcoins at a lower price. Now, let's move on. We have two parties that we deal with. We have a buyer and a seller. We're going to focus for a moment on the seller and ask the question, how can sellers give discounts? Well, same thing. They've been investing in it and they bought it at a low and they're selling it high. The second is, obviously, they can sell, sellers give discounts because in order to send the money to have a buyer buy it quick enough, they can't sell it at the current market rate. They have to sell it at a slightly lower rate. So with that, that's another reason. And the same thing, money. And the real people that can provide discounts, the real people are the miners. These are the people that create the bitcoins themselves, because they produce the coin at much below market value. In fact, there have been a couple of articles, and we combined articles, and I'm basically, I think I'm going to jump real quickly to deal possibility. In terms of the chance of a Bitcoin deal going successfully, starts with the most gross discount that can be offered. Now, the people who can offer minus 20 down to maybe minus 11 to 10 generally are only miners. If you offer a Bitcoin at minus 20%, you got a 100% chance that your deal is going to be purchased by anybody and anybody. But you'll notice that as the discount drops, there is a quick drop in the ability to complete a deal. But most miners are capable, unless they're very greedy, are capable of providing discounts depending on their cost of mining. So these are the people that really are the ones that drive the discount. Now, we have a couple of miners in China that can offer discounts minus 25 to 30%, but they want to sell a minimum of 10,000 Bitcoins a day. And you've got to be in an unusual place to be able to do that. But miners, generally from minus 20 to minus 10. Now, people who can offer discounts, 10% down to 7%, notice the probability of the opportunities decrease. And who are these? Well, obviously, miners that don't want to preserve their profits, and old wallets. Now, what is an old wallet? It's anybody who purchased Bitcoins prior to 2015 because they bought it at such low price and they have such margins of profit, they can afford to do that. Aggregators. There are a lot of people now that are putting together sections of a combination of miners and old wallets and regular people that have needs and are moving huge quantities of money. Those are the people that can provide 10%, 9%, and distressed sellers. Now, standard sellers. Now, these are the people that are involved in either OTC, that's with any of the standard exchanges, or people that are working privately with each other. They provide various different kinds of discounts. Standard sellers, 6%, 5%, 4%, and 3%. My experience is, unless the buyer and all the people in between the buyer and the seller are willing to kind of work like they do in credit cards or like they do in large financial transactions, where you don't get paid on 1%, but you take that 1% and you shave it off into 0.5%, 1/4%, 1/10%, 100%. 100%, 100th of $1 million is still a nice chunk of money even it's $10,000, $20,000. Standard sellers and the regular folks. And these are people that are OTC and usually give a 1 or 2% discount, if at all. Rest of people forget that when you move into an exchange and when you exit the exchange, it costs you to sell your coin. That's a subject we talk about in another OTC issue, because a lot of people are losing a lot of money not recognizing that. Now, let's go on over here. The simplest and the most convenient and the best possible deal possible is when a seller who will provide a reasonable kind of discount can call up on his phone to this gorgeous buyer who has lots of money, and he calls her up and says, "Hey, Sally, I gotta sell you about 40, 50 Bitcoins. You got the coins?" She says, "Yes." He said, "Okay, I'll send the coins. You send the money." Done. Done in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes, maybe an hour. I sat in a deal that took place in New York where somebody sold 15,000 Bitcoins without anybody in between. Money went out, the coins went out, so she could do what she needed to do. And she said, "Hey, if I get the money to you in about 3 days, is that good?" "No problem, I can hold it." And why is it possible? Because both of these people knew each other and had been trading with each other for over 10, 15 years on other kinds of business, or their family members, or their trusted friends that have the financial wherewithal and they have the trust between. These are the ideal sales, and many of you will, over a period of time, be able to do some of these yourself. Now, the next common is the broker, where the broker knows the seller really well, and the seller knows the broker, and they trust each other, and he happens to have a relationship with a buyer, and the buyer trusts him, and he is able to say, "Sally, you want some Bitcoin? Well, I know this guy in Michigan, Robert.Luebke. He's a great guy, known him for years." And Sally says, "Well, if you know him, and since I've been working with you for years, go ahead and get him together." And usually the broker most likely will obtain some kind of thank you payment. And it's either covered by both of these people, or it's a favor he does in exchange for something else. But this is the next simplest kind of deal. Now, the majority of people don't know each other, but if there is somebody that you meet at a Bitcoin convention, they're a speaker, you trust them, or you think they're good people, but you want the security the deal is going to work, then you need to bring in a combination of either a separate escrow person or a separate paymaster. And the paymaster is responsible for making sure the money comes in from the buyer who sends the cash, and that it goes out on a timely basis to the person who's provided the coin. The escrow and paymaster services. Sometimes, usually the deal starts where the seller provides the coin to the escrow paymaster, and the buyer provides the coin. There is testing of the coin with either Satoshi or other technologies to validate that the coin is real. It doesn't have any bad history to it, and it's viable. It's not a fake coin. And at a simultaneous process, they go ahead and exchange the two. The deal is done. It requires contracts. Now, this is about the safest guaranteed way to have people that don't quite trust each other to work together and make something happen. But now you're introducing a level of complexity, because the seller has rules of how he wants to sell his coin. The buyers have expectations and rules and procedures. And of course, the escrow service has it. So now you've introduced one level of complication a second level of complication, and a third level of complication. Sometimes the buyer says, I don't know your escrow service, or I don't know your paymaster service. I don't feel comfortable with them. So now you increase the cost, because usually in a deal like this, because there's nobody else in between, a deal like this, you're going to provide a discount, say 3%, and she is going to pick it up expecting 3%, but because of the escrow, you're going to have to pay 1 full percent just to have this deal guaranteed. And many people say it's well worth the heartache. But if the buyer doesn't trust the seller's escrow, then she wants to work with her person, and he wants to work with his person. Now you've got an increase in fees that could range for a full point, one for one, one for the other. Now the level of discount has really been reduced. So these are some of the issues that you have to consider in educating those people that are involved of how you're going to get compromised. And lawyers never really want to compromise if they don't have to, because they want their money. Now, the next level of complication is bringing back into the broker, because now the broker has to oftentimes go between these people, and these people. You've just added anywhere from several hours to possibly 1 to 3 additional days to get this deal done. The next level is where there isn't a specific broker, but you have a person who is either the mandate. And let's talk about the definition of a mandate. A mandate is a person who can represent the seller or can represent the buyer, and the buyer and seller never have to even talk to each other, because these people have legally binding signature and responsibility and representation. And in the United States, we don't have yet the requirement to be a legal mandate. But the state of California and now the state of New York is looking to make that another expensive cost to becoming a Bitcoin deal trader, to be a true mandate. So the word mandate means the legal connectivity. A better term would be the representative, which means this person can't sign for the deal, but this person can do all the preparation of documents, work with the buyer's mandate. These two people work out the deal, have commonality and work out the deal with them. But again, you've got these people's rules. This guy's got to deal with his and doesn't have control of the seller. The mandate here doesn't have control of the buyer. And these two people usually have to fight it out while the other people kind of watch the battle. Many of you have already been in that kind of deal. Now, let's bring in a new level of complication. Because the ability to find really, really good people, there is no National Association of Bitcoin Traders. One of the ideas we'd like to advance is, could you imagine a certifying body internationally that would create a quality standard of how the Bitcoin deal goes, and provide training and provide opportunities for trust building and provide procedures and provide extra precautionary resources and tools and structure to have something like that? That's an idea we're playing with, and we hope that some of you will find that interesting enough to consider. But problem is, this person has no idea that this other person exists. This person's in the United States. This person is in Cameroon, Africa. Well, this person knows this person who knows this person who knows this person who knows this person and knows this person, and connects the deal. This is where deals start to fall apart, because every person in the daisy chain, every person here expects their part of the deal. And some people make this stupid mistake, and many of us have experienced that when you have what's supposed to be the buyer-seller meeting, these people demand to be in the meeting, and then they start talking. These people say, screw you, forget it. And if people haven't been careful, these people are going to find each other another way, and they're going to do the deal without these people. At some point in time, all these people got to get out of the way and let the two people cut the deal, but be sure you have a contract among these and a contract with this person and that person and this person and that person. And these are some of the legal documents that people rush, and then they wonder why they don't get shit. Excuse my French. German is worse. Now, if you add the next level, where you have these people connecting the mandates together. Again, these people have rules. Each of these people have rules. And I have seen deals, in fact, I'm in one right now, that this deal is falling apart because it's got this guy here in the middle who absolutely says, I'm not going to give you access to this buyer unless I get paid up front. And when these people hear about it, they're yelling and screaming. The deal has gone down the tubes. So I hope that you are understanding the complexity and recognize we got to do things about it. Another thing that you have to take in consideration, only recently are we finding that certain exchanges, and I'm not going to name the exchanges because if I don't have direct experience with the exchanges, or these people who are trying to bypass the escrow people by creating special exchanges that have built-in security or KYC capability handling or guarantee that the Bitcoin won't go out until the cash has come in. Robert.Luebke.STA is one of those special places. There are people that are beginning to find some shortcomings. There's been hacking on certain sites. I'm not specifically saying Robert.Luebke.STA, but there are a number of sites out there that claim to do it. But what they're doing is they're actually stealing wallet information, waiting because they have patience. Maybe you get an idea where they're coming from. They have patience and they have all the technology to either duplicate the coins and send them elsewhere or take the exchange information and proceed with hacking people's wallets and stuff. I'm embarrassed to tell you there's a law firm in Colorado that has been professing to be one of the best honest law firms. There are a lot of people in several countries that are looking to do some class action suits against these people. So you have to be careful. Even the banks sometimes, ledger to ledger, which means we're all working with the same common bank and we're just trading from my ledger to the other person's ledger in the same bank. Even those transactions can go bad. So I'm trying to sensitize you to some of these issues. Now, what I would like to have you consider are what are the good exchanges, what are the bad exchanges. These are just some of the exchanges out there, and we will have another seminar that speaks to some of the pros and cons. But one of the things people forget, that the bigger the exchange, the greater the possibility of hacking, the increased difficulty of getting on the exchange, and people are frustrated, like for example, trying to get on Kraken. I've got a pretty damn good credit rating, I got a pretty good reputation, but I'm having trouble getting to level 3 with Kraken. Why? I don't know. Some people use other short new term items that are not proven. Sometimes the early deals go well, sometimes the early deals don't. One of the things that we are contemplating is coming up with a different kind of exchange. We're thinking of it 3 levels. The first level is going to be absolutely private. The purpose of it is to promote nobody in between and deals going between quasi-known people, because the exchange itself promotes itself among its own people. And to join the exchange, you got to pay at least $1,000 or $4,000 or $10,000 to be a member, because that gets rid of a lot of riffraff. The second kind of exchange is going to be one of a more charitable nature. It is going to be an educational opportunity, because some of you people have been talking about, isn't it interesting? There are a couple mining companies that are lowering the cost of mining because, you know, electricity and technology is what burns up raises the cost of the production of coin. Somebody shared a couple of interesting ideas of taking mining opportunities and putting them out in Arabian deserts or on African plains where solar panels can cut the cost of electricity to the point where it's cheaper to give people jobs in remote villages that would never have any jobs at all because of the ability to engage in mining operations in all sorts of places. So that is one kind of exchange that we want to tie into. But can you imagine, from an educational point of view, having an exchange that provides mining opportunities to school children and educating the next generation to engage in Bitcoin? And is this a selfish thing to do? Some people say, oh, you're just stupid, Robert. Why do it? I want to remind you that back in the day when microcomputers were just in the ideas of some of the scientists and technologists, the universities were starting to teach a common programming language called BASIC. And it had components of every type of computer programming that was popular in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And this BASIC program was learned by so many young people. And what eventually happened was that these individuals began to require that the companies they went to work for to use these languages instead of what they were using. It provides the foundation for future Bitcoin activities. Now, I would like to stop here and talk about how do we look at the Bitcoin deal. Basically, we look at ourselves on a separate island called the STA Dealmaker Island. And what happens is we have a bunch of individuals, perhaps a seller comes to our port and it says, guess what, Robert Luebke? I've got 10,000 Bitcoins to sell. So what do? We hit a button and broadcast out, and we send the message, and we hope that we can find a buyer that would be willing to come to the port based on the terms that this seller has and the terms we have. And they agree, and this little fellow walks back and forth and works out the deal with the mandates, etc. And a deal is done, and the buyer goes off with their coin, and the seller leaves the port, and it's great. Now, let's carry this analogy a little bit further. Let's assume a buyer comes in and says, I would like to buy 50 Bitcoins a day for the next 10 weeks. So we broadcast, and we keep on broadcasting, and we don't have any sellers that we can get or miners to us in time. What happens? This buyer leaves the port, we've lost the deal, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to convey to you is that there is a very short window of opportunity to get people in together, working out the deals and making things happen. So this is kind of a takeaway thought. Now, I'm just getting to near the end of the presentation, because now I'd like to introduce to you a concept. And one of the concepts is providing some standardized procedures that people can look at and understand and present in a common fashion. This is not done today. Everybody's got their own formats. But one of the things we're hoping to do is provide some standard formats. And we have this as a sample document. Now, another thing I would like to present to you is something that is called the Bitcoin distribution document. Let's assume that you are in negotiation with an individual and they say, what's the current rate of the Bitcoin? Let's say today's market is, say, $6,500 today. That's the current Bitcoin rate. And somebody says, I want to sell 300 Bitcoins. Now, this calculator lets you see that this is going to be a $1.9 million sale. Now, you remember we said in our little presentation, we said that you can have a whole bunch of people. Let me bring this slide up. A whole bunch of people involved. So let's assume that the seller is willing to offer a gross discount of only 6%. So that means that the escrow paymaster for the seller is expecting 1%, and the mandate or the representation of the seller is expecting at least 1%. And if they're intermediaries, intermediary number 1 is expecting 0.5%, intermediate number 2 is expecting 1%, and the buyer, and etc. So already you start at 6, and the best the buyer is going to be able to do is get 2.5%. And this is something to help you in terms of whether it's cash that's going to be distributed, or as many people, they're actually saying, I don't want the cash, I want the Bitcoins. So this is a little tool that we're happy to give you, which will help you, because what you're going to find is if you start having the guy in the middle who says, I want 0.5%, I'm sorry, not 50%, I want a 0.5%, and this person over here wants 0.2%. Guess what? Oh, not 2. I'm sorry. 0.2%. 0.2%. No wonder buyers are not going to be interested in anything, because you got too many people in the middle. And so we're trying to help you understand and use this tool in the early discussions, getting the intermediaries to understand the greater the discount here and the greater the amount of that discount can go to the buyer, important thing. So this is a tool we're going to make available to you, and you can use it to your leisure. Now, we would like to provide you with an experience, and now this is a place where I'd like to have some volunteers. This is an example of the, shall we say, deal sheet that we use. The deal sheet has the ability to provide information about the initial deal and the information about the actual deal itself. So let's pretend that Ezekiel has a deal. Now there's some known people here, and I'm not going to ask anybody who doesn't particularly want to participate in it, but the initial date was today, 10/04 and 18. So that's when it happened. Well, who initiated this deal? Well, Robert.Luebke did. RJL. He's the one who started it. Now, it doesn't have a deal number yet because the deal doesn't exist yet. So the next thing you have to say, when does that boat leave the dock? When do we have to get this deal done? Well, let's assume that today is already the 4th. The boat's going to stay there until 10/09/18. So that means you've got only 5 days to get this deal done. And sometimes people will say, completed by 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, because the escrow service won't be able to do anything beyond a certain time. Now, try to give it a deal name. Let's call this deal the EZ, and I'm going to ask, I see a person here named Grace. Grace, perhaps you might be willing to be involved in this deal in some fashion. In fact, we're going to make you the seller. And we're going to start off by saying, you want to sell how many coins? She's going to sell 300 Bitcoins. Now, what kind of coin? Well, is she going to sell Litecoin? Is she going to sell other coin? Doesn't matter. Let's assume that this one is specifically a Bitcoin. And is it the right of the buyer or seller to dictate what the buyer gets? Well, this is where decisions have to be made. Grace says, what kind of discount is she willing to give? Well, for a lousy 300 Bitcoins, we'd be lucky if we get 7%. So she would like to see at least the buyer to get 3%. So that means at this point in time, let's go ahead and we have somebody named 360. Well, 360 is involved in this deal, acting as the first intermediate. And we have Grace, who is actually the mandate for her seller, whoever that is. So now you've got some money that's got to be spread. Let's assume Grace, you don't have to show Ezekiel is the one who connects your mic is not on. 360 to, we can't hear you. Your mic doesn't work. You haven't hit the green button. On this side of the equation. Cannot hear you. So Ezekiel is going to be expecting stay down. I'll do the. So I'm going to say. I'm sorry. Ezekiel. Now, it just so happens that Ezekiel happens to know a person by the name of Maxwell, and it's Maxwell who is connected to Robert, who is connected to the buyer mandate and whoever the buyer is. Now, every deal has requirements. And in this case, I'm going to change the requirements on this, and it's going to be 300 Bitcoins. And on the first day, they're going to do between 5 and 10. Day 2, they're going to do 10 to 25, and the remaining 250. And don't worry about the math. I'm not concerned about that for the purposes of the deal. And all the information about the deal is described here. Now, at this point in time, we take this information and we put it on the initial deal sheet. Get back to the deal sheet. Let me go here, copy all this stuff. Control C, move it over to the initial deal sheet. Get rid of this and put this stuff in it. Now, this sheet is enough for you to be able to start providing the buyer and the seller and all the people in between enough information. Again, the number of coins we know is 300. Now, this information should have come over. There's a shortcoming here. And this is where you say, well, we're looking for a -7 to a -9%. And to make sure this comes out, I'll put a little mark there, enter. And the recommended buyer discount isn't determined at this point. We don't know the locked value, and we don't have a final agreement on the seller discount. But we have enough information here. Again, current price is, what does it say, 6,438, whatever it is. So we have all the basic information. And this is a signal. You can just simply highlight this, or you can just take this part of the spreadsheet and send it out. And therefore, it's then up to the people to decide, what documents do we need? Do we need an attorney letter? Well, it's not applicable. Do we need the authorization to verify the funds. We'll say it's in progress. Is an escrow payment deal required? Yes, it's required. Is the letter of intent for the seller or buyer required? So this is a tool that we offer you that will help in the documentation of the procedures, the initial negotiated deal requirements, and the ability to have an initial deal sheet defined. And then as time goes on, once the initial people meet, then you start filling in the real data, and then you start dealing with that initial problem of how are we going to split the money between people and percentages so that everybody, including from the gross discount, we got to pay for the buyer escrow if necessary, the seller escrow, and the net discount, and all the way down to what the buyer gets. And these are calculating fields that we make available to you. So why did I spend the time showing you all this? Because number one, we want to communicate to you guys that you are involved with a group of people that have spent a lot of time thinking out and providing tools and services to make it worth your while to work with us in bringing in deals and working with us to attract more miners, more buyers, more sellers, and to explore ways of making a soup of synergy, a group of different people from all over the world to work together, build trust, have enough trust to start doing deals together, and create a special environment that is going to provide trust, integrity, communication, respect, and all the other ingredients to make a successful sale. So with that, I'm going to wish everybody a good night if you're in the Western Hemisphere. If you're on the eastern side of the world, I hope you have a great day. And all of you in between, just enjoy your time. Thank you, Robert.Luebke, Solution Technology Associates. And my hope is that you guys will get in touch with me in the future and that we can do some good business. I will go ahead and once again, thank you all for coming.